In 1991, two 99-year-old women in Japan recorded a song and it climbed the charts. They sat for television commercials. They went on quiz shows. The whole country fell in love with them. Their names were Kin and Gin, which in Japanese mean gold and silver, and they were identical twin sisters who had been born on the same August morning in 1892. Put their ages together that year, and you got 198 years of human life sitting side by side on a sofa, laughing at the same jokes they had been laughing at for a century. And they were not retired. They were working. That is the part I keep coming back to. Two women, 99 years old each, with a new career. There is something hidden in how these sisters ate and lived that explains it, and it is not a secret food. Get a pen. We're going to walk through their day because the way Kin and Gin reached 100 together is something you can start copying tonight. Let me give you the shape of their lives first because the shape matters as much as the food. Kin Narita and Gin Kani were born in a farming village near Nagoya in central Japan in 1892. They were identical. They grew up together, married, raised families a short distance apart, and stayed close their whole long lives. Kin lived to 107. Gin lived to 108. Between them, they saw 3 centuries touch. And when they became famous in their late 90s, the thing people could not get over was not that they were old. Plenty of people get old. It was that they were so clearly enjoying it. Sharp, funny, curious, still busy. The nation gave them a nickname, Kin-san Gin-san, and treated them like national treasures because they were a living picture of the one thing everyone wants and almost nobody believes is possible. A long life that is still worth living at the very end. Now walk into the kitchen with me because the food is the first thread. When people asked the sisters what they ate, the answer that came up again and again was fish. Specifically, the red-fleshed fish of the Japanese table, the tuna, and the bonito and the mackerel, the kind that swims hard and carries a deep, dark muscle. That choice is doing quiet work. Red-fleshed fish is one of the richest natural sources of the marine fats that cool inflammation in the arteries and the brain. The people who eat fish like this several times a week across decades have measurably lower rates of the heart disease and the memory loss that takes so many of us in our 70s and 80s. Kin and Gin were not eating fish as a health protocol. It was simply what was on the table in Japan every week, their whole lives. The protocol found them. But here is the thing about their plate that matters more than the fish, and it is easy to miss. It was small. This is the Japanese habit the rest of the world keeps rediscovering and forgetting. You eat until you are about 80% full, and then you stop before the heaviness sets in. The sisters ate this way without thinking about it, the way everyone of their generation did. Small bowls, a little of many things. Fish, rice, vegetables, soup, pickles, tea, all in modest amounts, none of it piled high. Across 100 years, that single habit, stopping a few bites early, adds up to a body that was never once asked to carry the constant overload most of us hand out 3 times a day. Think about your own last meal for a second. Did you stop when the hunger was gone, or did you stop when the plate was empty? For Kin and Gin, those were 2 very different moments, and they always chose the first one. There is more on their table worth naming because the fish never sat there alone. The Japanese plate the sisters grew up with was built around things the modern Western kitchen barely touches. Soy, in the form of tofu and miso and natto, gave them plant protein and the fermented compounds that feed a healthy gut. Seaweed gave them minerals from the sea that almost nobody on land gets enough of, iodine and magnesium, and a kind of fiber found nowhere else. Vegetables came simmered and pickled rather than drowned in oil, and almost everything came with a bowl of soup, usually miso, which is the quiet trick of the Japanese meal. A warm bowl of broth at the start of eating slows you down and fills you up so the small plate that follows is plenty. The sisters were not counting any of this. It was simply the food of their place in their time, a diet that the rest of the world would spend the next century trying to reverse engineer in a laboratory. And then there was the tea. Green tea ran through their days the way coffee runs through ours, cup after small cup, hot, unsweetened, sipped slowly between tasks and visits. Green tea carries a family of plant compounds that calm inflammation and support the blood vessels, and the people who drink it daily across a lifetime. the way the sisters did, show up in the longevity studies again and again. But notice the other thing the tea was doing. It was a reason to pause, a reason to sit, a reason to be with someone for a few minutes with nothing to do but talk. The cup was never just the cup. In Japan, the tea is a small daily ceremony of stopping, and stopping, it turns out, is as protective as any single food. Kin and Gin stopped for tea many times a day for 100 years. Set the food aside for a moment because the next thread is the one that surprised the researchers most, and it is movement. The sisters stayed physically active deep into their 90s. They were not athletes. They did the ordinary moving of an ordinary Japanese life that nobody in that generation thought to call exercise. They walked. They got down to the floor to sit and got back up again over and over every single day, a motion that quietly keeps the legs and the hips strong in a way no machine at a gym does. Getting up off the floor is one of the truest tests of how long you will keep your independence. And the sisters performed that test, unknowingly, dozens of times a day for 100 years. By the time most people reach 80, they have stopped getting down to the floor entirely, and the strength to rise leaves with the habit. Kin and Gin never stopped, so they never lost it. I want to come back to one detail about their fame, because it is not a side story. It is the engine. Hold the year 91 in your head. The reason these two women picked up new work at 99 matters more than anything on their plates. Before I tell you what they did with their fame, sit with how unusual that fame was. In 1991, Japan was the richest, most modern country imaginable, full of young celebrities and bright new things. And the people the whole nation chose to adore were two 99-year-old farm women with country accents and identical wrinkled faces. The sisters became the most beloved faces on Japanese television almost overnight. There is a reason a hyper-modern country fell so hard for two women near 100, and it was hunger. A quiet national hunger to believe that the last chapter of life could be bright instead of grim. Kin and Gin were proof. Every time they laughed on camera, an entire country exhaled. That is worth holding on to because it tells you the sisters were not famous for being old. They were famous for being alive in a way that made old age look like something to walk toward instead of dread. Let me change the camera angle to the heart of it. When the sisters became famous, they did not treat it as a curiosity to endure. They leaned in. They learned. Gin, the younger by a few minutes and the one who lived longest, was known for keeping her mind sharp on purpose. She practiced arithmetic. She followed the news. She wanted to know what was going on in the country that had suddenly fallen in love with her. The money they earned from their television work, they were proud to say, they wanted to spend on their own care so as not to burden their families, and some of it they gave away. At 99, they had a reason to wake up, a new thing to do, a purpose that the world had handed them, and they had grabbed with both hands. The Japanese have a word for that reason to wake up. It is ikigai, the thing that makes the morning worth getting out of bed for. Most people lose theirs somewhere after retirement. Kin and Gin found a brand new one at 99, and they wrote it for nearly a decade. This is the part the rest of the world keeps getting wrong about long life. People chase the food and ignore the reason. They will copy the fish and the small bowls and the green tea, and then they will sit alone in a quiet house with nothing to do and wonder why they feel themselves fading. The food is real and it matters, but the sisters did not last 107 and 108 years on tuna alone. They lasted because they had each other, and they had work, and they had a country that needed them to keep showing up. That is the ingredient you cannot buy, and it is free. This is where I tell you about the structure of a long-lived life, because it is built for exactly this gap. A proper reset takes the food half of the equation, the fish, the small plate, the plant-heavy bowls of Japan, in Sardinia and Nicoya, and lays it across 90 days with the shopping lists and recipes already done for you. But it does not stop at the plate, because the sisters prove the plate is only half the job. The plan pairs the food with the daily movement and daily purpose habits that every one of these long-lived people shared. So you are not just eating like a centenarian, you are living the shape of their day. This protocol plus the guidance is one complete package. If you have ever felt that you had the diet right, but something was still missing, the something is in the second half of that plan. Now stay with me because the most copyable part of the sister story is still coming, and it costs nothing at all. So let me put the whole day of kin and Jin in front of you, the way you could actually build it. Start with the togetherness, because it is the foundation everything else stood on. The sisters were almost never alone. They talked daily. They visited. They sat together. That constant, warm, low company is one of the most powerful measured protectors of a long life there is. Stronger than most of what gets sold in a bottle. You do not have a twin, but you have people. And the lesson is to use them on purpose every day. A standing phone call, a shared meal, a neighbor you check on. The sisters did not schedule their connection. It was simply the air they breathed. For most of us now, it has to be deliberate because the modern house is built for solitude. Make it deliberate. Now layer the food on top of the company. Eat fish a few times a week, the oily red flesh kind if you can find it, because that is the fat that protects the heart and the brain. Build your plate small and varied instead of large and plain, a little of many things, and stop when the hunger is gone rather than when the plate is clean. Lean your meals toward vegetables and rice and soup, the way the Japanese table does, with the fish as a partner rather than a centerpiece. None of this is exotic. All of it was ordinary in the world the sisters grew up in. We are the strange ones with our enormous single-dish plates and our eating until we ache. Then add the movement. And here is the most important piece, the one I asked you to hold. Get down to the floor and get back up once a day on purpose. If you can do it easily, do it several times. If it is hard, that is the most important sign you will get today. And it is the exact reason to start slowly and with support, holding a chair. The strength to rise off the floor is the strength to live alone, to garden, to play with a grandchild, to fall and get up instead of falling and staying down. The sisters kept it because they used it daily without ever calling it training. You can do the same starting tonight. Down and up. That is the whole movement. The body remembers fast when you ask it to. And then, the part that holds all of it together. Find the reason to wake up. Kin and Jin found a new one at 99, but you do not have to wait for a television crew to knock on your door. The reason can be a garden, a grandchild, a craft, a class, a friend who needs you, a project that is not finished. Retirement removed the reason for so many people and handed them a recliner in its place. And the body follows the mind down into stillness. The sisters never stopped having somewhere to be and someone who needed them. That, more than the fish, more than the small bowls, more than the floor, is why two 99-year-old women had the spark to record a song that a whole nation sang along to. And notice how unremarkable each single piece is. A bit of fish, a small bowl, a cup of tea, a trip down to the floor, a phone call. Not one of those things would make a headline on its own. No magazine would run a story about a woman who drank green tea and got up off the floor. But that is precisely the trap the modern longevity market sets for you. It needs the secret to be dramatic, because a dramatic secret is something it can sell you. The sisters had no dramatic secret. They had a stack of small, dull, ordinary good choices, repeated without fail across 38,000 days. The drama was in the repetition, not in any one act. That is the hardest lesson in all of longevity and the cheapest. The things that keep you are boring, and they only work if you do them when no one is watching and nothing feels like it is changing. Here's the contradiction I want to leave you with. We are told that long life is the reward for sacrifice. Eat less of everything you like. Sit still. Grow careful and small and quiet. Kin and Jin did the opposite. At 99, they got louder, busier, more curious, more involved, more useful, not less. They worked. They earned. They laughed on national television. They leaned all the way into being alive right up to 108. The long life was not a reward for shrinking. It was the result of staying fully, stubbornly, joyfully in the game. Gold and silver did not tiptoe toward the end. They walked toward it with their heads up together, the way they had walked toward everything since that August morning in 1892. Now somebody is already thinking it, so let me say it out loud. They were identical twins, so surely this is all just good genes and the rest of us are out of luck. Hold that thought, because the twins themselves are the answer to it. Identical twins share the same genetic code, the exact same blueprint. And yet Kin and Jin did not die on the same day. One lived to 107, the other to 108. Same genes, different endings, more than a year apart. If genes wrote the whole story, the two of them would have run out at the same moment. They did not. The gap between their two deaths is the space where everything else lives. The food, the movement, the company, the purpose, the day-to-day choices. Genes loaded the deck in their favor, no question, but the sisters played the hand for 100 years, and how you play it is the part you control. Do the math on your own grandparents for a second. The ones who stayed busy and connected and moving almost always outlasted the ones who sat down, even in the same family, with much the same blood. There is one more small thing from their table I want to give you, because it is easy and it is real. The deep flavor of the Japanese meal, the savory backbone of all those soups and simmered dishes, came from dashi, a simple broth made from seaweed and dried bonito, that same red-fleshed fish. It means the sisters got a thread of sea minerals and fish nutrients woven through nearly everything they ate, not just on fish nights, but every day, in the broth underneath the meal. You can borrow the idea without the exact ingredients. Build your cooking on real broth instead of bouillon cubes and bottled sauce, and you pull a little more nourishment and a lot less salt and sugar into every pot. It is the kind of small, invisible choice repeated daily that the sisters' whole lives were made of. So tonight, do 3 small things in their memory. Eat a smaller plate and stop a few bites early. Get down to the floor and stand back up, and call the person you have been meaning to call. That is Kin and Jin's day, distilled into something you can start before you sleep. Do it tomorrow, too. The full 90-day plan, the food and the movement and the daily structure all mapped out with the recipes done for you, is waiting. Subscribe so the next centenarian arrives in your feed, and we will walk into another long life together. And keep them simple. The sisters never chased the newest thing. They ate the food of their grandmothers, kept the company of their family, and stayed useful to the world right to the end. Gold and silver, 2 sisters, 198 years, and still working. Start with the floor. If this story changes the way you look at the simple habits of your day, please subscribe and like the channel. We are uncovering the history and the habits that have been hidden for too long. Let's plant the seeds for a longer future together. The next treasure of longevity will be open soon.